And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Monday morning's OTB AM. It is the week of the All Blacks game, so you'll forgive us if we're a little bit preoccupied with what's coming this weekend. That's going to be part of our conversation a little bit later on with Alan Quinlan. We're also going to speak about the weekend's GAA club action. Owen's in his element, really. So this is the happiest time of year, really, for you, isn't it? You can display your credentials as a proper clubman by getting out there and going to the intermediate inter-club championships.
There's no credentials to be shown, really. I think that my credential is rubber stamped at this point. I didn't go to any club games yesterday, though, so maybe my credential will get revoked.
You can sit there and watch 7 of them on TV.
Well, that is very true. You can decide not to watch the Premier League at certain points of the day, but when it comes to the Manchester Derby, you've got to throw on the Manchester Derby. When it comes to a point where Liverpool might be in a little trouble, you've got to throw on a little bit of Liverpool, particularly if Dr. Crokes are absolutely destroying everything in their wake. You want competitive action, so you had to look away from the club action, which is, we'll get to this in a little while, it's starting to mirror the inter-county scene a tad. You look at yesterday, 4 teams utterly dominant. They came from Dublin, they came from Kerry, they came from Galway, and they came from Mayo, destroying everything in their wake, just like they tend to do in their own inter-county provinces at the moment. So maybe that mirror kind of harbours something that's going to be a little bit worrying for the championship, that Rathnew win against St Vincent's this time last year was really one of the most astonishing results we've seen in modern GAA, and we didn't just quite appreciate it at the time.
Maybe. The rugby, obviously, we're going to look back at the weekend. You had a good line there about imagine being in Carton House right now.
Well, Carton House right now is kind of like every single player feels like what it's like to be in a Clockwork Orange. Just looking at the video from Saturday night and the screams that nobody can hear all around Carton House at the moment as those notoriously brutal video sessions just get taken up a notch, which is all fair game at the moment. They know what they're into. They know what they're in for, I should say, when it comes to being in a Joe Schmidt squad. And
your point is we played really badly.
We played really badly, but the point is that Joe Schmidt hasn't had to twist a knife in a Monday morning video session for quite some time. I'm not saying that he enjoys doing it at all, but he's like, well, this kind of is a little bit nostalgic. This is almost like 2013 all over again. I get to, like, what was it, Australia in 2013 before we went out and almost beat the All Blacks a week later. I'd imagine that this morning is going to be like that Monday morning in Carton House in 2013, where, as I say, the screams won't be heard anywhere, but it's going to be highly brutal, and it might pay dividends on Saturday, and I hope it does.
The other thing we're going to talk about, Daniel Harris is going to join us a little bit later on to talk about the Manchester Derby. There's a general assumption that yesterday was kind of the high water mark of people distinguishing between Manchester City and Manchester United. The past was yours, but the future is ours. Mine. As Liam Gallagher tweeted out yesterday, which had I think there was still about 25 minutes left to go in the game when he did it. Is that right? Was there about?
I didn't see the Liam Gallagher tweet yesterday.
Oh yeah, it was like, you guys are finished now, it's over. Because we got all that money, which has come from, great sources. No one cares, turns out. Football fans don't care. Especially
the goading Manchester City fans who were olaying after 65 minutes. Was that the earliest olaying session we've ever seen in a Manchester derby? I sure hope it was, because
I'd say there were times when Man United were killing them, or they would have been doing it from very early on as well.
Like pre-half time, I'd like to see 65 minutes. I would dare say is a record, certainly in the modern rivalry, since the Noisy Neighbours have come on board. Even the 6-1, I can't imagine there was olays after an hour of that match. Like, it was incredible, and it almost bit them in the ass, because as soon as those olays started, Lukaku came on and secured that penalty. But it was all temporary, wasn't it? A temporary sort of reprise, temporary kind of postponement of what we thought was going to be a match.
Yeah, so remember a couple of weeks ago we thought the sack was imminent for Jose Mourinho. Remember, we thought the sack was imminent. The pass was yours to Tijs Mania, so we just took that. No, 9:38 AM. What's that? I don't know. It was definitely. Maybe he did a pre-game. Did he? I only noticed it during the game.
That would suggest at 9:38 AM. I don't think there was any football on, so that would suggest it was a pre-match tweet from Liam Gallagher.
Up all night, I hope. Anyway, if you're a Man United fan, we'd like to hear from you. Should they sack Mourinho now and get it over with and start the rebuilding process, or do you try and somehow get this team to be in the top 4 with Mourinho at the end of the season, and it's a Champions League job next year for somebody? What do you do? What do you do?
The fact of the matter is, Jose Mourinho was safe 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
We had gone on this journey where it was looking like
he's back.
A certainty that Jose Mourinho was going to be sacked by Christmas, to a certainty that he was easily going to last into the new year. And now it seems to have flipped right the way back again, to the point where we're like, well, does Jose have to go? But you could easily point to the personnel available to him yesterday, as he conveniently did himself. that he doesn't seem to worry too much about what's available to him in the starting 11 until players in the starting 11 like Paul Pogba pull up with an injury, and you're faced with a midfield which was desperately poor yesterday in terms of Fellaini, Matic and Herrera. Not in terms of poor, in terms of one of the all-time desperate displays in the Premier League, but just in terms of what you're looking at in terms of the opposition. When you look at Fernandinho, who was sensational yesterday, you look at someone like Gundogan coming off the bench, which is an unbelievable option. But of course, Jose Mourinho pointed to that in his post-match thoughts, that having somebody like that coming off the bench is certainly a big factor when it comes to deciding these games.
Well, I mean, he's got pretty good players on the bench if he could just get good performances from them, right?
Well, pretty good is not good enough anymore when you're looking at with the quality that Manchester City have. What they have is excellence throughout their squad.
Yeah, but I think are you not in danger of buying into the rubbish that Mourinho's peddling there by saying, man, don't have a good squad? They spent $500 million on their squad.
Yeah, they have.
They've got a really good squad.
They sure
and some
have.
of their best players are free. Well, Alexis Sanchez. It's just they can't get good performances from them because he's not managing his resources properly.
I'd agree, yeah. But there is a difference, though, between a very good squad and an outrageously good squad.
Hang on. His bench, the 3 players he brought on were Lukaku, Mata and Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah, in fairness.
The amount of money that he spent on that.
In fairness, yeah, without question, he should be doing a lot more with them. But there's also no question that Manchester City have a better squad than Manchester United.
Yeah, because they keep buying crap at Man United.
Yeah, they really do. But is Jose solely to blame for that?
I don't know.
Maybe he's solely to blame for the people that they do buy. Obviously, the people that they don't buy, you can't entirely give the blame to Jose Mourinho on all of that. The thing with Manchester City is you can't really list too many players that they failed to buy down through the last 2 seasons.
No. All right, let's bring in the newspapers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
So the Irish Times, Sports Monday, Schmidt faces tough calls ahead of the big one. O'Brien ruled out of All Blacks battle while Murray will return highly unlikely, says Jerry Thornley. There's a great picture from Dr. Croaks powering past St Finbarrs. What was the score? 520 to 111. So pretty one-sided there. Hansen expects Murray to be fit to face the All Blacks. So that's Gavin Cumsky's story. Just like here, Thornley saying it's unlikely to happen. But Steve Hansen seems to know a lot about this.
He really does. He's been quoted more than any other person. He is the expert in the Conor Murray injury field. If you were to do a primetime documentary right now on the fitness of Conor Murray, your talking head on the fitness of Conor Murray, the expert on the fitness of Conor Murray, would be Steve Hansen. It wouldn't be Johan van Graan. It wouldn't be anybody from Limerick. It wouldn't be Joe Schmidt. It would be Steve Hansen. He is the expert on the Conor Murray conundrum, and he said he would put money on Conor Murray playing. It seemed like a fairly entertaining press conference that Hansen did yesterday. And hopefully more of that as the week goes on. But he says if you're a player of that calibre, you want to play. Pretty sure Joe Schmidt is going to make that call.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Conor Murray, despite what Steve Hansen says, expert Conor Murray, talking head Steve Hansen says.
Marmion went off injured, right? So it looks like maybe whatever, and he has been battling injury all season, so maybe suddenly he's unavailable. It's like, Luke McGrath gets the start?
Yeah, why not?
Conor Murray on the bench?
Well, no. Do you really think that's a possibility?
Well, what?
Get Conor Murray on the bench.
He's only fit enough for half an hour to close the game out. Because we're a bit obsessed with closing the game out against New Zealand.
Yeah, finishing. When it comes to finishers, there's no better scrum half in the world that you'd want to finish a game than Conor Murray. The problem is, it's the other old cliche. If he's fit enough to be on the bench, he's fit enough to start. But maybe not on this occasion.
I don't know. Look, it will be interesting to see if it happens or not. One story on the back of the Times that I want to bring your attention to. Kiwis not wild about defectors. This is Gregor Paul, the New Zealand Herald on Sunday's rugby correspondent. He's basically saying that the Ireland rugby team is packed full of cast-offs from the New Zealand rugby system and we should go and shite, basically. That, those people have stabbed New Zealand in the back. An Irish team that wins suddenly starts to look like an Irish fusion team, with the Kiwi element within it no longer viewed as happy-go-lucky opportunists, but men who have stabbed their homeland in the back. He's looking at you, Bundy Aki, in particular, and really only you, Bundy Aki.
It's a warning to James Lowe. We're going to get into that a little bit more in our breakfast menu very shortly, but James Lowe would say he'd send out a big warning to you as well.
Obviously, Matt Doherty spoke with Jamie on, now that's what I call sport, on Sunday morning. It makes the Irish Times today. We can have a quick look at him. Here he is talking about the whole Declan Rice situation. Not too fussed one way or another.
Yeah, I've been in I think maybe three, maybe.
Okay.
I think ever since he made his first one.
What's your thoughts on the ongoing saga of if he's going to pick Ireland or England?
Well, I haven't really taken much notice of it, to be honest. Obviously, I see little bits here and there, but I'm not looking into it. I don't really care, to be honest. You can choose either one. I'm not really that bothered.
He is, though, a very, very good player. And, you know, do you feel if he did pick Ireland, he would be a starter and would add a lot to us? We spoke about you and Seamus and Cyrus being Premier League players. He's the same. Yeah,
of course he is. I mean, he can play in the back three, he can play centre back, he can play centre mid. He's obviously a very good player. And he would be an asset to the squad, of course he would. But that's just his decision at the end of the day. And whatever he chooses, that'll be his choice and everybody else will get on with it.
And you're a dub, Matt. You've obviously, you know, I think you possibly play for Holland as well due to your parentage as well. You know, there are other players in the Ireland squad similar to Declan who, you know, are from England, have grown up there but have Irish heritage and are playing for Ireland as well. If he did pick Ireland, would he be welcomed back with open arms to the squad?
Oh yeah, I mean, I assume so, definitely. There'd be nobody would really look badly on it. I wouldn't anyway, for sure. It's a tough decision for him. I mean, he is English, and his parents that might be Irish, but he was born there. So it's not an easy decision for him. He's got to give him as much time as he wants, and when he makes a decision, he makes it.
Yeah, that's Matt Doherty speaking with Jamie there on That's What I Call Sport on 90 FM on Saturday morning. You can hear that full interview on the Now That's What I Call Sport podcast stream if you want to get more of that. On to the Times Ireland edition. We're playing for the world, says Hansen. So Steve Hansen, this is a game between number 1 and number 2, so whoever wins will be the best team in the world regardless of ranking. It'll be a goodie. That's what he means, we're playing for the world. It's not that the All Blacks are representing the world against Ireland, that somehow, you know, we're the big bad evil team who have really influenced the game at its core level and, you know, pilfered the islands for their best players and never really given them back the support that they should have had in the first place. We're not that team. That's somebody else.
Who is that team?
The team of violent thugs who should have all been sent off the last time they were here. That team. Well, that's not us either. That was the team wearing black that night. That was the team the rules had to be changed for that team.
Yeah, I wonder if Steve Hansen is accusing us of counter-imperialism. Is that what we can? Is that the label we can put on this? Is the Gregor Paul article there that you mentioned that we get to
post-colonial inferiority complex from where their post-colonial inferiority complex is worse than ours?
Yeah,
I mean that'll be a thing.
It really would be. It's an interesting complex where we don't settle for the passing of colonialism. We say, actually, now that you've had your turn, it's our turn. Which I think is an eye for an eye.
Yeah, I mean, you know. Obafemi in line to make Irish debut. I mean, okay, so teenager Michael Obafemi could be handed his Ireland debut in Thursday's friendly against Northern Ireland after Shane Long was ruled out through injury. So Obafemi's got a few minutes here and there for Southampton across the course of the season. Like, still only a friendly though.
But the hilarious thing is Martin O'Neill about 6 days ago was like, what do you want me to do? Cap 15-year-olds? Which clearly wasn't sarcastic. He was being serious. He was going to start capping 15-year-olds. That's what he's going to do with Michael Obafemi. But as you say, it's just against Northern Ireland in that friendly, so he won't be signed, sealed and delivered as an Ireland player just yet. Maybe we're better off not capping him then. Like, would Declan Rice be in the situation he is if we just didn't cap him in the summer? I wonder, did that pique England's interest a little bit, where they were like, oh, that guy played a couple of international minutes?
I think the fact that he was really good for West Ham piqued their interest.
It probably did. They probably weren't watching Ireland against the USA in June, were they?
No. And the bit where
preparing for the World Cup.
The bit where the owner was like, oh, you're going to play for England, son. I was like, oh, I already play for Ireland. Don't worry, I'll fix that. That's what you're getting from David Gold. We'll go through the rest of the weekend's rugby with Alan Quinlan a little bit later on, but I mean, I don't think it's a terrible thing that Obafemi gets capped. If he's going to play for Ireland, he's going to play for Ireland. It's like, it's the start of a long career, right?
Yeah. The other thing, though, is when I say that perhaps Ireland shouldn't have capped Declan Rice wouldn't have come into the camp, and if he was influenced by whatever happened between Roy Keane and Harry Arter, he wasn't like, oh God, I wish I didn't see this. Maybe if he just didn't see the inside of the camp.
I mean, if that is really true, then
it's probably like it.
Go on, Declan, off you go. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I don't really subscribe to that theory personally, but maybe there is a nub of truth in it. That bring the person in at the very right time. Don't give them time to let any negative thoughts fester.
Mourinho's 90-minute admission of failure inferiority. Mourinho's insistence that people shouldn't mind such trivial things as statistics was bonkers. Losing 3-1 is a stat you can't ignore, says Eamon Sweeney. And Paul Hayward, best of all was in claiming Paul Pogba's injury removed Marouane Fellaini as a late game weapon that City would have succumbed to. It's like, we didn't have Fellaini to introduce as our plan B when we were 3-1 down, so when we went 3-1 down we had no plan B.
Yeah, in fact I thought Marouane Fellaini during that early onslaught was okay. He made like 100,000 clearances, which was a decent enough return from Fellaini, and he played an important enough role. Of course, though, as the game wore on, you're kind of thinking to yourself, at what point do we get to see the novelty of him up front once again, which is not a novelty at all anymore. But the answer was, we never would. And that's kind of a heartbreaking end to what could have been a fairy tale ending for Manchester United yesterday afternoon. But,
what have you got?
I've got the Irish Daily Mail, which is going with the rugby again. Is it a con job, asks the back page of the Mail. I'll put money on Murray playing, insists Hansen. And big guns line up for titles, says Philip Lanigan as he rounds up the weekend's Club GAA. Show off, says the back of the Irish Daily Star. This is Pep's pop at Sterling's gloating in Derby win and flagging Fulham hit out. Jokanovic is not a happy man after Alexander Mitrovic's goal was ruled out yesterday afternoon against Liverpool, and of course Mo Salah went straight up the pitch and banged in Liverpool's first goal of the game. Despite the fact that Fulham were well in the game at that point, it could have been a very interesting afternoon if that goal had stood for Fulham yesterday. Back page of the Mirror is 3 an easy City. Jose says Pep's Blues had nice relaxing build-up to Derby. Plenty of excuses, and Anfield crowd turned officials against Fulham. That's the Jokanovic story as well. And Hansen saying is, forget rankings, if you win you are number one. That is the battle for the world this Saturday at the Aviva. Back page of the Herald is City kill United's title aim. Premier leaders different class in Derby, while Manning in the mood as Crokes run amok. He scored 2-6 yesterday. Paul Manning and his Kilmacud Crokes beat St. Peter's Dunboyne 2-17, 7 points. Back page of the Sun then is Jose. Pep's had it easy. Well, he didn't make this very tough for them either, says the little sneery brackets in red at the bottom. And Tribe go wild without Joe. Joe Canning saw red in Sydney, but in this Wild Geese tournament, a novel tournament, Galway, it finished Galway 4-23, Kilkenny 3-26, which was a draw. It went to freeze, and Galway ended up winning 4-3 in those frees. The Daily Telegraph then is Silver Service. City rule Manchester after Aguero and Silva destroy United in Derby.
Why do we have frees instead of penalties?
Because penalties are too in keeping with that foreign sport.
But it's better, isn't it?
Of course it is.
It'd be much more fun. Frees are so random.
I'm not actually being totally tongue-in-cheek when I say that they picked frees over penalties because they didn't want it to be like soccer. I do wonder if that was actually a factor in it, because it doesn't really make much sense. Penalties are far better. And also the goalkeeper is a part. You can actually prevent the things instead of letting one person fail.
There's no other reason than it was a copy from soccer. That's it.
It must be.
Even they could have stolen the hockey thing where you can dribble in from wherever and you got a set number of... that's too easy, I think, isn't it? If you're dribbling in...
Unless you put a defender against the person.
1-on-1.
Yeah. With hockey, obviously, the goals are tiny, and the goalkeeper's got all that padding, so they're huge. So, yeah, that would be too easy. But if you put a defender on them, there might be something in that. Or else just do a penalty shootout.
Do a proper penalty
shootout.
Yeah.
Last back page is The Guardian. Mind the gap. City exposed classified as Mourinho reaches for excuses. And reaching he did. And that's all he did yesterday in Postman. I think he went on for ages and ages and ages, just reaching and reaching and reaching. Finding some absolute gems, in fairness. The Fellaini one is top-notch, Jose.
Stephen Reid was part of the Manchester Derby coverage here on Off the Ball alongside Dave McIntyre. Here's their post-match reaction. Have a look.
For Manchester United, because they'll have a chance to stew over today, because we're heading into an international break. I'm not sure whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing right now, whether they need this break away from each other. But they host Crystal Palace and Young Boys in their next 2 games, then it's a visit to Southampton, and then they will be in that territory where they're either going to be in the knockout stages of the Champions League or they're not. 4 of their next 5 games are at Old Trafford. Is that going to be the defining period as to whether or not we see Jose Mourinho at Old Trafford in January or for the longer term?
I can't see him going before the end of the season, that's for sure. I think the Champions League is going to be key. As long as they're in the Champions League, I still think he'll be in the position. I think that's going to be key to the success of their season. It's going to be a real battle now, because there seems to be a gap opening up now between Manchester City, between Liverpool. and Chelsea have got off to a flyer as well. But even Tottenham are a team that have managed to keep their squad together. Key players and the manager signing new contracts, so they're going to be a team that's on the up. They're going to be moving into their new stadium. They're going to be an attractive proposition potentially for the top players in European football. So it's going to be an interesting, not only 6 months and towards the end of the season, but the gap between Manchester United now, if they don't close that gap quickly and finish in that top 4 this season, that could be a disaster for the club.
Stephen Reid there talking in the aftermath of yesterday's 3-1 defeat for Manchester United with Dave McIntyre, our commentary team obviously here on Off the Ball. Now Daniel Harris is with us this morning to give us his response to what the lads have just been saying, to the game generally. Let's start with the game generally. Was it really as pronounced a gap in class as that yesterday? Is that where these two teams are right now, or is actually the gap a little bit bigger than a 3-1 scoreline?
I think you could answer yes to all of those questions in a way, in that 3-1, United got away with 3-1. When City scored, made it 2-0 at the beginning of the second half. As a United supporter, I would for sure have signed for 3-1 at that point, because it looked like it could have got a lot worse. City, but I didn't totally agree with what Stephen Reid was saying there, in that City are a class above United, but they're a class above all the other teams in the league as well. And so it's unfortunate that United are in a position where their local rivals are the best team, but they're not miles better just than United. They're miles better than everyone else, and I don't think United are much worse than Chelsea, than Spurs, than Liverpool. They just had a dodgy start to the season, and we'll see what the difference between those teams is closer towards the end of the season. United aren't that far away from them, and I don't think it would be that surprising if they finished in the top 4 from here.
Okay, so you're not as panicked maybe as some of the Manchester United fans out there at the moment. The whole, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on, the whole notion that Mourinho's job security seemed like a bit on a knife edge for a couple of weeks back there. That passed. Results and performances and the post-match press conference like yesterday can tend to reanimate that whole sense of danger that his Manchester United career was in. Where do you stand on that, and how likely is it that he will actually see it to the end of the season?
I think if things proceed in a normal manner, and obviously things are often not normal with Jose Mourinho, he'll be there till the end of the season, because they had started to put together not exactly some performances, but some passages of play that were promising and started to look like a better football team than they had earlier in the season. So if they start beating the teams that they should beat, then he'll be fine. He looks like he's going to qualify in the Champions League now. And the thing about United is that they're not going to solve their problems, all of them, by firing Jose Mourinho, because the problems at the club are far worse than anything that has anything to do with Jose Mourinho. And we talk about this quite a lot. But when Fergie left, Fergie was effectively this old genius inventor who had this contraption, but he was the only person who knew how to get it to work. And so, which was an underfunded team that somehow he'd managed to, his genius had created title winners out of that team. So when he turned up, in order to compete with the best teams, United needed a new player in almost every position. And what happened was that the years of underinvestment under the Glazers, those chickens came home to roost when they lost that genius who knew how to get things done. And so successive managers and successive bad appointments have made that difficult. And it's happened to come at the same time that City have finally realised that the only way really to extract the maximum from the ridiculous amounts of money they've been allowed to spend is to get a top manager. City now have that, and you're seeing the difference, because previously Fergie was able to make up that difference. Now United don't have Fergie, and City don't have Pellegrini or Roberto Mancini, but they have Pep Guardiola. And that's why there's a difference between City and United, and that's why there's a difference between City and everyone else. City aren't going to win the league this season by 2 or 3 points. They're going to win the league by 10 points, maybe more.
Well, the only counter argument to all of that is that Mourinho is not actually making any of the players that much better. So even if there is that difference where they do have the money and the manager in Manchester City, Manchester United don't even have the manager who's improving players. Like, it doesn't seem like any of the players are organised or coaching or finding space or getting their heads up or confident or actually becoming better footballers under Jose Mourinho.
There are problems with Mourinho, but I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. I mean, Luke Shaw looks like a better player than he did. Jesse Lingard looks like a better player than he did. Victor Lindelof looks like a better player than he did. Against Juventus, we saw Anthony Martial actually putting in a shift, which was something we've not seen him do very much of either. I think the problem with Mourinho, and if you look at the problem yesterday, is it's quite hard to look at the team that he picked and think, how are you planning to get a result here? He was without Paul Pogba, which was a huge problem for him because Pogba's his best outfield player. But to then replace him with Marouane Fellaini, who actually played all right and was probably United's best player, but in the scheme of the way the match was likely to go, it was quite hard to see what was going to happen that was going to enable United to get a result, because you can't have Fellaini and Matic in the same midfield and hope to be able to compete with City's quick-footed, quick-witted players. And that was a very big problem, particularly when you think that he was allowed limited funds in the summer. He spent most of them on Fred, and he seems to have no intention of playing Fred in any game that counts. And that is a big problem with Mourinho. But that also does come back to the problem, in the wider problem, that he can't afford any failures in the transfer market because the money isn't being given him to fail. Every transfer he makes more or less has to work, or else he's got a problem. And that's not the case with Guardiola. So you have to get your buys right, and that is a problem with the manager when you don't. But even Liverpool were able to go and sign Virgil van Dijk and Fabinho and Shaqiri. So Fabinho looks like similar to Fred, one of those players who turns up and everyone looks at each other and thinks, oh, doesn't look like this guy's very good after all. But for Liverpool, it doesn't matter as much. Whereas for Mourinho, it matters absolutely because he needed Fred. His midfield needed Fred, and he needed Fred to be good. And the problem with the way he set up yesterday was, what are the tactics to do something about this? And if you look at the way teams play against City, you can either sit back, well, he doesn't have the defence for that, or Liverpool are able to beat them by running them off the pitch in midfield. And so United needed to think more about that. Is there a team that can physically run them off the pitch in midfield? And if there is, it certainly doesn't include Matic and Fellaini, but that was what he did. And what you saw was the fruits of that, but not just the fruits of that. The fruits of everything that's gone on in United in the last 15 years were written large on the pitch yesterday. But it didn't seem like Mourinho was giving his team the best chance of doing something about it, if there was indeed anything about it that could be done.
Yeah, for sure. I also think in the elements that we saw yesterday in the second half that, you know, often when it comes to Jose Mourinho, at least you can gain some encouragement from the idea that he often has a plan, even if it is, in your view, a flawed plan, and that may come from being too conservative or too defensive or whatever it may be. But I thought yesterday, particularly around the third Manchester City goal, there was a sort of indecisive nature to how Manchester United set up. Do they press or do they not press? And Fellaini presses into midfield at one point, tries to dive in for a tackle, which opens up Gundogan in the first place, who gets that initial possession, who sets up the attack that gets the ball into the box, which ultimately results in him putting the ball into the back of the net, which comes from a lack of cohesion in the Manchester United midfield, where Fellaini presses, but the rest of the Manchester United midfield just aren't going with him. Are we now at the point where this flawed plan by Jose Mourinho, in some people's view, has just been replaced by no plan at all in a situation that seemed as desperate as it did yesterday?
Possibly. I mean, I think what you see when you play a team that are much better than you is teams start to make mistakes towards the end of the game when physically and mentally they're spent. So it is true that for a large part of the time under Mourinho, United haven't looked like they know what they're doing. But actually, for the first half an hour, for the first half against Juventus, they looked for the first time in a long time like a team that did actually know what they were doing, and they did have a plan. So those kind of things, there have been shoots of recovery over the last few games where they've looked like they've got a bit of impetus, and I wouldn't necessarily read too much into something that happens in the 85th minute of a game where they've taken an absolute hiding and spent almost all that game chasing the ball. And even in that City game, in the first half, they actually, it sounds like bizarre to praise this in a United team, but they got into City's half and had some dangerous situations, more than they had when they played City at Old Trafford last season, more than in the first half of the game against City, when the away game at City last season also. But the attackers made bad decisions when they actually got themselves into good situations. And that was actually more than they had shown, which, I mean, it's damning with faint praise because all it does really is highlight just how horrific they've been in previous games against City. And sometimes you have a situation where your team, one team isn't particularly good, the other team is excellent, but also the particular matchup is not in favour of that team. So I don't think Liverpool are a very much better team than Spurs, but the matchup against Manchester City happens to suit Liverpool better than it suits Spurs, because Spurs are closer to a less good version of the same thing than Liverpool are, whereas Liverpool are able to, as I said, run City off the pitch in a way that Spurs can't do. And United are more similar to Spurs in that aspect, in that the way that football is set up is they don't really have the players to compete with Manchester City in midfield, whoever they pick in midfield. They just have some attackers that can sometimes do some good stuff. And that, amazingly, last season was enough to get a result in the away game because City collapsed, but that will very rarely be the case. And so this particular matchup is very poor for United. But United have a lot of work to do. And the question in the end is, do I think Mourinho is able to take United to where they want to be? No, I don't suppose I do. But then you're combining the best manager in the world with the most money in the world. Who is going to be able to do that? It's going to take something very significant, and it doesn't. Which is why getting rid of Mourinho isn't necessarily going to solve the problems. In fact, it isn't going to solve the problems.
It isn't going to solve. Definitely isn't going to solve the problem. But the point that I think you've probably answered my next question. You're going down the wrong road with Mourinho. So even if, say, the Glazers sold the club to somebody who had endless money tomorrow, I don't know if Jose Mourinho could pick 11 players in the world and play them in the style that he wants the team to play and somehow actually finish the league season ahead of Manchester City, because his style of play, his philosophy on football seems to be the wrong philosophy at the moment. That the game has progressed to a point where his team is always going to be a muscular team that concedes possession, that isn't that interested in controlling the game. But the current trend in football is against that, and that we've kind of moved a little bit beyond that.
I know what you're saying, and sometimes I think that it's true, but there's only one manager in world football that has taken a league title off teams that play in that way, I think, and it's Jose Mourinho, who did it. Okay, Jose Mourinho and Ger and Eoin. So he took a manager off Guardiola's Barcelona, and Antonio Conte did it also, playing in a not dissimilar way to Mourinho. I think the idea that Mourinho's football is outdated, I don't particularly buy that, because I think all Mourinho's good teams would be pushing this Manchester City team. If he had his Real Madrid team here, if he had that first Chelsea team here, then you'd see a race for the league title, because he had the right players. The question is what he does when he doesn't have Carvalho and Drogba and Lampard and Terry. Then he's got a problem. And I think you've seen more attacking cohesion from United in recent weeks. I don't know particularly that that's anything Mourinho's coaching them. It's impossible to say. Is it just that he's playing the same players and playing the same style? So if you play Luke Shaw, Paul Pogba and Anthony Martial, and they play together down the left, they'll build a relationship. And that is one of the key elements that hasn't been there all the time Mourinho's been at United, is players playing in the same position week after week after week. And I think from now, if he just allows that to happen, you'll probably see the team get better, and you'll probably see the team beat most of the teams that they should beat. The question is what value Mourinho is adding to that, and that is much harder to put your finger on if you're not going to training sessions, if you're not sitting in the team talks. But in the end, do I think, let's look at last season, do I think that any manager in the world would have managed the players that United had and got them much closer to City? Not really. Do I think that any manager pre-season before that would have done more than a League Cup and a UEFA Cup? Not really. So there are not compelling cases for keeping Mourinho, but it's not that hard to make a case. And similarly, it's not that easy to make a case for saying, well, actually, this bloke would come in and it would definitely be better. Because, I wanted Pochettino as a United supporter. When they appointed Mourinho, I wanted Pochettino. I saw why, as people that had financial interests in who the manager was, they appointed Mourinho and not Pochettino. But do I think that if United appointed Pochettino, they'd suddenly be pushing City for the league? Not necessarily, because we haven't quite seen that from Pochettino, who has done a brilliant job at Spurs with not a lot of money. But at the end, he lost the league to Leicester and he lost the league to Chelsea, and they weren't even close. And he hasn't won any cups either. So much as I respect Mauricio Pochettino, I've enjoyed watching his teams play. He would perhaps be the outstanding candidate to replace Mourinho if he even wanted the job, which he might very well not. But the idea that he would breeze in and be much better than Mourinho in the end is quite hard to sell. That would necessarily be the case. And the problem in the end, again, comes back to, at United, there's no one above Mourinho that knows anything about football. I mean, sometimes it appears that there's no one that knows anything about anything. So if you wanted, so what United supporters would like, let's say Mourinho got fired, or let's say Mourinho left, is I think someone who would come in and build something. And the idea that there's anyone involved at United who could identify that right person who would come in and build something, they probably have, whoever the right person is, if there even is one, these guys probably haven't even heard of them. So it's it's quite hard to advocate firing Mourinho in that aspect, just because is there anyone better out there? And there's so many things working against Mourinho. Obviously, one of those things working against Mourinho is Mourinho himself, which makes it complicated. But the whole situation is unnecessarily complicated. So I don't know is the answer to most of the questions.
What would have happened yesterday if Pep Guardiola was Manchester United manager and Jose Mourinho was Manchester City manager?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I don't think Pep Guardiola would be winning the league with this United team. And I think that Mourinho would be doing a better job with his players. And there's lots of the ways that City play that obviously is contingent on the way Guardiola thinks that football should be played. But I think Mourinho would probably be more interested in protecting a defence that contains that back four, who are good players, but none of them have shown anything that makes anyone think they're elite players. So... But I think if you swap the managers, I think City would still have won. But I also think that Guardiola would have picked a slightly different team to the one that Mourinho picked. But in the end, it is very hard to compete with City's midfield. And that is a lot to do with Guardiola, because obviously he's improved David Silva, he bought Bernardo Silva, he's improved Fernandinho. But they're just better players than Fellaini and Matic. And, I mean... it's hard to see where that question stops, because obviously Guardiola would never in a million years have bought Matic and never in a million years be picking Fellaini. I understand why Mourinho likes Fellaini. I don't really understand why he likes Matic, and I can't grasp why he thinks that the two of them together can form any sort of partnership against a good team. So that question is, I mean, obviously it has lots of caveats, but in the end, Guardiola is a better manager than Mourinho, but he also has far better players than Mourinho. So both of those things are the case.
So you've said, do you think City are going to win the league by 10, 12 points at the end of the year? Just how good can this Manchester City team be? And do they really need to win a Champions League, or at least progress to a point where they're legitimately competing for it, i.e. reaching a final, before we consider them one of the truly great teams, despite their achievements on the domestic front?
It's difficult, because when you evaluate good teams, the ways that I would always try and evaluate them to try and be objective, despite obviously being entirely subjective in terms of I support a team, is that I always look at who did you beat and what did you win, because those are the two things that it's very hard to argue against. Like the rest of it is all impressionistic, like what kind of football did you play? But to be a great team, if you look at the great teams across history, let's just talk about the Champions League era. Did all the great teams that you can name across that era win the Champions League? Yeah, they did. So you would sort of expect them to have to win it. And, I mean, they're going to retain the title, so that would also be something you'd look for. The only thing that they're currently falling down on is who have they beaten? And domestically, they've beaten absolutely no one. And currently in Europe, they haven't really beaten anyone either. Even, I'm not sure have they beaten anyone good in the group stages? Did they beat Barcelona last year? I think they did. Not a great Barcelona team, but they still beat them. But in the end, it's who did you beat in the highest pressure games? And so they're still probably lacking that, because last season they lost their two highest pressure games, and partly they're victims of their own success, because they won the league by so far that they only really played one pressure game in the league. Once the league was already in the bag but not secure against United, and one way or another they somehow collapsed, and they played Liverpool in Champions League, and they also collapsed in that one too. So those are questions that they've got to answer. I think they are going to answer them at some point. They've got a brilliant chance of winning the Champions League this season, A, because they're a really good team, and secondly, because the standard is quite similar. There are about 5 or 6 teams that you wouldn't be particularly surprised if they won the Champions League, that could all beat each other on a two-legged tie in a one-off. And so that's because the Champions League is a cup competition. But as I said, all the good teams, all the seriously great teams of the Champions League era found a way to win it at some point. So I would expect that City will win it at some point. It might not be this season. They probably do need to win it to be considered a great team, because it's something that all the great teams do. So yeah, they probably need to find their way to winning it at some point. But if Guardiola stays another 3 years, you would expect that to happen.
Yeah, like I guess when you put it into the context of great Premier League teams, like I agree with you on the Champions League point. I'm not so sure about how long-term it's got to be, though. I think if you look at the short-term and some of the age profile of some of these players, like even just in the first 10-15 minutes of that game yesterday when Manchester City clearly went through their best patch of the game, you suddenly just kind of get these glowing... you view David Silva in a glowing way, really, as you often do with Manchester City, and you start to realise that this guy is quite possibly one of the best players Manchester City has ever had in their team. And ultimately, it's during the David Silva, Sergio Aguero era that Manchester City have to win this Champions League, because there's no guarantee that whoever comes after them will be at that level.
No, I think that's right. I think you're right about that. I would say if I was a City supporter, I'd be more concerned about Aguero. David Silva never relied on pace. He wasn't quick 5 years ago. He's not quick now. I don't really see there's any reason why he's not going to be as good for the next 3 years. Aguero is slightly different because obviously he's a striker. Strikers rely on exploding, although he's not electrifyingly quick. He's quick over a couple of yards. And it is possible that he's had quite a lot of injuries. It's possible that he will slow down in the next couple of years. But I think that they've still got a bit of time to do it. And in terms of winning successive titles, I guess the way that you would look at it, the way I would look at it is, to what I was saying, there's only two teams in the Premier League era that have won 3 successive titles. And those teams also won the European Cup. And that's United of 98, 99 to 2000, 2001 and 06, 07 to 08, 09. They won European titles and they won 3 leagues in a row, and no other team has done it. So that to me seems to be the benchmark, because they also beat quality teams in the process of doing it. There was good competition in England and good competition in Europe at the time. So those are probably the 2 outstanding achievements of the period. And so City have got time to do that. I mean, if City, you would not, it's very hard. Like, you look at the players that City have got and you talk about Silva and Aguero, seems to me that they're still going to be good enough in 2 years' time, and it is hard to see anyone catching up enough with City to stop them winning the league, not just this season, but next season as well. And you wouldn't expect there to be a Champions League in that time, but you wouldn't be at all surprised if there was one. And once that starts to happen, then they are sort of satisfying the criteria of getting it done. And because also in the process of winning the Champions League, you're going to be under pressure at times. You're going to win big games. You're going to win big games under pressure. And those are the qualities that you would look for in great teams, in generational teams, in all-time great teams. So City definitely have the things that are there. We've talked about this before. The thing they perhaps lack is a bit of devil, a bit of bastardry. And I talk about that as someone just watching football. Those are things that I like to see. And I guess this City team, they do it for me. I mean, they do it for me aesthetically because they make nice patterns, but emotionally I don't find them particularly interesting. But that is, again, a subjective thing. So we're trying to be objective, and then it will come down to what you won and who you beat. And they look like they're going to get there.
Yeah, okay, a couple of quick comments from YouTube. Who takes over from Mourinho? Easy to sack him, not so easy to find a top replacement. Wait until the end of the season, more options open to Manchester United then. Alad, surely you're not that fickle and think Mourinho's going to be sacked after losing to possibly the best team in the world right now. I mean, I guess that's ultimately the point that you've been making. Fair enough, if you do want to sack him, what's the alternative? What's the vision for that? And the people making that decision, ultimately, and you made this point again and again, they don't have a clue what they're doing. So, they've probably got the best available candidate that they can have, and they're limiting his success in the way they're going to limit everybody's potential success.
I mean, Mourinho's not getting fired for losing to City. He's going to get fired if the next set of games don't go well, they don't finish in the top 4. City are going to beat almost every team home and away, and United should not be striving to be the best team that isn't City. They should be striving to win the league. But if Mourinho takes United into the Champions League, has a good run in the Champions League this season, and it looks like things are improving, he might well hang on to his job if he wants to continue, if he wants to hang on to his job. But if he gets fired, it won't be for getting beat by City. It will be for getting beat by teams that he should never be getting beat by, which happened in the first 10 games of the season, whatever it was, which was why it looked like his job was in jeopardy.
Who is responsible for signing players at Manchester United? Is there a transfer committee a la Liverpool? What happens?
My guess is Mourinho tells the board what he wants, and the board say yes or no. I mean, if you look at players that they're getting, they got Sanchez, who was about to be out of contract, and they signed Fred. They signed players who I think probably are affiliated to George Mendes and Mino Raiola. That's been a theme of the last few seasons. So there are those people that also have an input. And it's really hard to know without quite understanding the business of football, because people talk about, well, Ed Woodward doesn't know the right people and he doesn't network in the right way and all this kind of thing. But in the end, it seems to me that if you want a player from a team, you ask what the price is and they tell you what the price is and you negotiate a bit and then you either pay it or you don't pay it. And I don't know how people like to complicate these things. I wonder if it is, in fact, as complicated as that. I mean, I'm sure that doing actual contracts is complicated because you've got lots of interests, but in the end, I guess Mourinho says he wants a player, or he'll give, what usually used to happen with Fergie anyway, was he would say, I want this player, but here are some other alternatives to that player in the same position if you can't get that player. But it seems unlikely that the board ever vetoed Fergie's judgment on a player, which is what they're doing to Mourinho, or what everyone's agreed they're doing to Mourinho. So I guess the process is in some way flawed because it's not working, and Mourinho ended up, United, the difference between United and City last season wasn't Fred and Lee Grant. It was something way more significant than that, but the board decided that that wasn't what they were going to do. So the process probably involves phone calls to Tampa also, and they'll think about how much money they want to take out, how much they think the player is worth, or what they think the player will affect, if they think the player, signing the player will earn them more money. And then if it doesn't, then why would they want that player?
One last thing for me, Daniel. It's obviously the first time ever in the Premier League that over the first 12 games of the season, 3 different teams have gone unbeaten. Is this a good thing in your view for the Premier League as a whole? Is this going to give us some sort of title race, a 3-horse race? Because it certainly seems to me on the evidence of yesterday that it's just a temporary stopgap and a nice little statistic for us to talk about before Manchester City break away.
No, it's not good for the league. You want close games, and it's quite an interesting dynamic, though, and why it's come about, because the teams who are outside of the top, say, 8, have got more money than they've ever had before. So they have better players than they've ever had before also. So you see, like, teams are able to sign players from PSV and Porto and Benfica, like great old names in football who play in the Champions League, have to sell players to English clubs because English clubs have got so much more money than they do. And the problem is actually, it's not to do necessarily with the difference between the top and the bottom exactly in first 11s, but I think it's a bit to do with options, and it's a bit to do with Jose Mourinho, funnily enough, in that through the 80s and the 90s, there was this notion that Liverpool come on strong in the end of the season, in the second half of the season. United come on strong in the second half of the season, as though it was some kind of lovable quirk that they took August to January off. And Mourinho changed all of that. When he came in at Chelsea, first game as manager at Chelsea was United at home. He won 1-0, and he went on winning and winning and winning. And then you couldn't win the league with 75 points or 82 points anymore. You had to go and win the league. You had to play all season, and you had to win all season. And when Fergie took his first title off Mourinho in 06-07, he did it by beating Fulham 5-1 in the first game and continuing to amass an absolute shitload of points. And by changing that sort of changed the dynamic of the whole league, where the good teams realised that you actually had to win almost all the games. And what they have now is they have a lot of options that enable them to change a game if they're not winning. And they have subs that they can bring on, and they have rotation that means their top players are getting injured less and tired less. And so the distinction isn't exactly in the amount of money that they're able to spend on the team versus what other teams are able to spend, because those guys have better players than ever before. If you look through the league, look at the players that Wolves have got. When would a team like Wolves, who've just come up, have players as good as what they've got? Like, that never happened before. Almost every player in almost every club in the league has a player that can hurt you. The problem now is that the good teams have so many of those players and are also playing according to this pro forma where if you drop points, you've got a huge problem. Like Liverpool didn't beat Arsenal last week, and it was a disaster because they couldn't afford to drop points against Arsenal if they're going to compete with City. And it's the combination of those two things, like the squad sizes and the idea that you have to win every game, that is responsible for these unbeaten teams. I mean, it is also a bit of a freak this season because Chelsea aren't that good and aren't playing that well, and Spurs aren't that good and aren't playing that well, but they're just squeaking tight games. So I think that won't happen next season, and if they don't start playing a bit better, that'll stop quite soon. But the answer to the question is no. This is a really bad thing for the league because the point of football is you want there to be jeopardy. You want to know. You don't want to know what's going to happen. If you know what's going to happen, then that's not what sport's about. It's about waiting to see what's going to happen. And we talk about this a lot, but the only way to remedy the problem in the end is to have limit squad sizes. It's to limit the amount. It's to have a salary cap. It's to have a cap on the amount of players you're allowed to sign, the amount of money you're allowed to spend, and then you can sort of maintain some level of balance that teams that make loads of money are able to spend more, because otherwise we're talking about a draft system like in American football, and that's never going to work. But you do need to limit what teams are allowed to do if you want to have a really competitive league. And if you look at the NFL, which does have a draft system, that is a league where it's always competitive. The problem with the NFL is that it's almost a rota, that if you support a team long enough, you'll see them win, because it's a closed shop, and the only way you keep a closed shop exciting is by giving everyone a chance. And that keeps the circle of money going round and round is just this kind of almost artificially created excitement, drama, and competitiveness. And football's never been like that, and it would be impossible to impose it. But you could definitely impose strictures if you were at all bothered about making it interesting and fair. Unfortunately, the people that run this stuff are interested in making money, and they don't give a shit about interestingness or fairness. They just care about how much you make money. And to them, what's interesting is just the biggest clubs playing the biggest clubs in the biggest games, getting the biggest television audiences. But that isn't what supporting a football team is about. It's not what English football's about. It's not what any league football's about, really. And it's unlikely that anyone is going to do anything about that. And we're going to see more of this, not less of this.
Daniel, great stuff this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
No, I'll see you again.
Daniel Harris giving us some thoughts after the Manchester derby yesterday. Finished 3-1 to Manchester City. Okay, going to just play you this. Stephen Kelly was at Chelsea with Nathan Murphy. Here he is talking about Everton's performance, where they managed to frustrate Chelsea and maybe kill off their title challenge.
It's been interesting listening to Seamus Coleman for many reasons over the last couple of weeks. He's had a lot to say, but one of the key things he's been saying about Everton is that players needed to take more responsibility, that managers, they were going through them too quickly, and in the dressing room nobody else was taking responsibility, that the players knew the manager would always bear the brunt. He's spoken really highly of the character of the players they brought in and what they brought over the last 3-4 months. Is that what we saw today? Is that a game that Everton lose last season?
Yeah, I think Everton definitely would have lost this last season. And again, they need to grow. They need to show, like I said, show that character. And if they are, the money they've spent as a club is quite a lot over the last few seasons. So they need to kind of show that they're moving in the right direction. For them, moving in the right direction needs to be pushing those teams. I don't think they're going to compete with the top six. I just don't think they're as good as those teams. But to be threatening them and causing those teams issues and possibly getting results in stadiums like this or away games against the top teams, that will be them progressing. And today is a step forward.
They've waited a while to see Yerry Mina. He had to wait because Kurt Zouma's been so good. He couldn't play today because he's on loan from Chelsea. With your defender's hat on, from what you saw of Yerry Mina, came with a big reputation from Barcelona, brilliant World Cup with Colombia. What did you make of him?
Yeah, I thought he did very well today. I was kind of looking forward to seeing him because the World Cup I thought he was excellent. They scored some great goals, but I just thought he had moments of lapse in concentration. But today against Chelsea, who are always probing, always moving off the ball, and the front three that do interact very well. Morata was good today, but not as good as what he could have been. And I thought he stood it well. He stood the test very well. He performed well, came out with the ball at times when he needed to, and all around there was a solid performance. 0-0 in your first game away to Stamford Bridge is a good performance.
That's Stephen Kelly, part of our commentary team yesterday for the Everton-Chelsea game. I mean, I was being a little bit facetious when I said that maybe those drop points was the end of Chelsea's title challenge, but not really. You can't afford to drop points. Phil, how are you? Can you?
All good. That's City are going to win it, aren't they?
You just write off a team who's unbeaten from winning the Premier League.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's completely fine to do that.
Like,
sad indictment of where we're at. It's a sad indictment of how...
That's 4 points behind.
That's why we found ourselves watching things like Boca Juniors and River Plate and Dortmund and Bayern Munich over the weekend, because we need to get our football fix from other leagues as well.
Boca and River finished 2-2?
Yeah.
Next leg, when's it next?
2 weeks.
So it's 2 weeks?
Yeah,
That's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 weeks to stir up more hatred.
It's a good game?
Yeah, like you like the thoughts of it.
Yeah.
But then you actually sit down and you watch it and go, oh, this is why I don't really watch Argentinian football.
A lot of kicking?
A lot of kicking. One little scuffle in the first half. Interesting.
That sounds good. I mean, you're selling me.
Well, I have to say, I did enjoy when River Plate went to take corners. No pigs' heads now, but a lot of missiles.
Yeah.
So no, it was okay. The best game, I actually didn't get to see the Barca and Real Betis game because I'm like Ryan Giggs. I don't have 11 Sports, but I watched the Dortmund and Bayern Munich game. I was kind of flicking between that. Imagine going from that to Palace and Spurs. Kind of flicking. That was an amazing game.
Yeah.
What, Palace Spurs?
Yeah.
Honestly, I enjoyed Palace Spurs to no end. Just the character arc of Juan Foyth has been one of the highlights of the Premier League season so far. Disastrous debut. Full debut last week. He was away 2 penalties against Wolves, almost cost them the game. Disastrous start to the game at the weekend, almost cost them a goal. It gets destroyed by, who was it? Townsend, who he forgets to just run with him despite the fact he's running through on goal. Then has an awful calamity trying to pass the ball back to Lloris. And then he decides, actually, you know what? I'm good at football. And plays an unbelievable crossfield pass, and then he comes up with the winner. So I think if you're into gritty performances, a kid pulling a performance out of the bag, then Crystal Palace Spurs is the game for you. Forget your silky football.
It's also, you just flick over, you've got Sellers Park, and then you've got Dortmund playing in their famous stadium. Just it just looked a lot slicker, and VAR on the show as well.
Class? No, is Sellers Park not like one of those kind of nice venues? And no, I don't know.
Oh, I'd love to go. It's one of those, especially under the lights.
Yeah.
Is Dortmund beating Bayern Munich a bigger shock than if Manchester United had beaten Manchester City? In terms of resources, in terms of the gap?
I don't think so because of the way things are going for Bayern under Kovac.
The way things are going, but in terms of the way the odds are stacked, financially, in terms of what the resources that they've got.
Yeah, you could definitely.
Like I would always say that Bayern Munich had definitely more of a vice-like grip on the Bundesliga over the past 12, 24 months than
100
Manchester
years.
City have had.
Yeah, 100 years.
Well,
yes.
forever.
Yeah.
And what they do is they just sign Dortmund's
history's
best
all
players.
Yeah.
And Lewandowski actually scored in injury time, and you think, oh no, Dortmund have been sucker punched here, but offside and VAR. Like, there's a lot of decisions in the Premier League over the weekend that could have done with VAR.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering when are we getting it?
What's in the news today?
We'll start with the Premier League, and obviously Manchester City, still the team to catch, produced another impressive performance, beat Manchester United 3-1 at the Etihad Stadium. David Silva gave City a first half lead. Sergio Aguero made it 2-0 early in the second half, and as is the case a lot of the time these days, United then got into action, pulled a goal back. Anthony Martial with a penalty after Romelu Lukaku was brought down. But Ilkay Gundogan came off the bench to secure the win for City, who are still 2 points clear at the top. United, though, down in 8th place after a 4th defeat of the season. They're 12 points behind City. We can hear from both managers now. Jose Mourinho, followed by this man, Pep Guardiola.
I'm so satisfied. We maintain that level, and at the end, Liverpool win or another win, let's shake hands. We don't have regrets. Important in life, in football, is don't have regrets about what you do. And if we do in that way, we can lose, but with a heads up, because we don't have complaints for ourselves.
We had to play Fellaini. Fellaini was not ready to play for 90 minutes. I can just imagine when the result was 2-1 to bring a fresh Fellaini to the pitch. I think they would be in big trouble.
It's mad, isn't it?
It sounds really bad for Fellaini. We had to play him. But Fred was on the bench. You know that guy they paid 50 million for?
Alexis Sanchez was on the bench.
Yeah.
It sounds like a father giving out to his petulant child. You're going to be in big trouble now if you, I don't know what, if you eat that yogurt or whatever. I don't know what kids do that is petulant.
He's right in a way, though. If it was 2-1 with 15 minutes to go.
Oh, it would have been interesting to see. Like,
then City would have been sweating a bit.
But this guy's so good that he's going to change the game at 2-1 down. Why can't he change the game when it's 0-0?
You just look at him
1-0 or 2-0.
when it's been pinged around midfield. Like he's just like that person who's got the bib when they're playing trying to keep the ball off, and he can't get rid of his bib because he's just chasing shadows.
I do wonder about that parallel universe if Jose was Manchester City boss. Would Fernandinho just be a Brazilian version of Nemanja Matic? Because yesterday, it seems like a ridiculous thing to say because there's poles apart. Fernandinho, arguably the best midfielder in the Premier League on form right now. Utterly outstanding yesterday. What age is he? 34? 33?
32.
But you put Jose Mourinho in charge of him. Is he making those passes? Is he as instrumental from that position? I really think it would have a detrimental result on how we would view Fernandinho and the qualities of Fernandinho.
He'd still pick up all those non-existent yellow cards. He is the master of fouling people without getting booked.
He's 33.
Yeah.
34 soon, I think.
No, next May.
And funny enough, he's
May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Remember that.
Jedi-like performance.
He really struggles for Brazil, though. If you think of the games that Brazil have lost at the last 2 World Cups, the Germany game, it was shocking. And then the game against Belgium, he had another shocker.
Which would suggest that management of this individual's and his role within the team is very important. And I don't know if Jose would have got it right. I also, like Daniel Harris was saying, that Luke Shaw is beginning to play well. It's like, I mean, late in the game for his relationship with Mourinho, to give Mourinho the credit at this point to get Luke Shaw to be playing well.
Let's not forget that Luke Shaw was one of the best full-backs in the world, or about to become one of the best full-backs in the world. He got injured and he's now just beginning his development a little bit later. It's not like Jose Mourinho has had his relationship with Luke Shaw kind of postponed to the point where his development is postponed. It's due to the fact that he got injured really badly.
Yeah.
Is he playing that well though? Luke Shaw? Is the bar so low with him? Because Mourinho basically looked like he was going to ship him out and we don't expect anything from him.
I think there's definitely truth in what you say there. I think he started the season extremely well.
Yeah.
Has he been outstanding for the last month? I think it's arguable.
Like, who are the best left backs in the Premier League? You're looking at, actually, Mendy I didn't think was great yesterday, but Andy Robertson now and Marcus Alonso.
Yeah, like Alonso was brilliant again yesterday for Chelsea. That's probably it. But like I think Luke Shaw, fantastic recovery. The idea that Jose Mourinho can give himself all the credit for where he's come to this point, I think, is a bit of a nonsense.
Yeah, well, obviously Man City are 2 points clear of Liverpool. Liverpool are up to second place thanks to a 2-0 win at home to Fulham. Mo Salah put Liverpool ahead 4 minutes before half-time, but it was just seconds after Alexander Mitrovic thought he had given Fulham the lead. The goal was ruled out for offside. We've seen the replays. Do we think it was offside?
Mitrovic? No. Robertson's trailing leg.
Yeah.
And who was the Fulham teammate that was offside but doesn't touch the ball at all? Whatever it was, the other Fulham player looked like he was a tad further advanced than Mitrovic. I don't think so. I think it was. But also, the big thing was that the ball was rolling when Alisson took the resulting free kick. So it was a double whammy for Fulham.
Yeah, I know Liverpool fans are going to point out that these things even themselves up. Last week, the Sadio Mane goal, but the second goal came from Xherdan Shaqiri. Obviously didn't go to Belgrade during the week, but he scored in the 53rd minute. So Liverpool still unbeaten and 2 points behind City. Chelsea were the big losers in the title race. They lost ground. Even though they're still unbeaten, they were held to a scoreless draw by Everton. Seamus Coleman was part of the Everton side. After the game at Stamford Bridge, Nathan Murphy spoke to the Republic of Ireland captain. Obviously upcoming internationals. Ireland play Northern Ireland in a friendly at the Aviva on Thursday night. Then they play Denmark in the Nations League on Monday night in Aarhus. And Coleman says they need 2 positive results.
First and foremost, put on a performance. But as soon as we meet up, full focus is on the 2 games. We want 2 good performances, 2 positive results going into what's going to be massive games in March. Because we haven't been at our best, and I'll be the first to tell you that. Unfortunately, we've had, I've played a few games here and there, missed a few. We've not really had, a strong 11 in consecutive games as such. So it's about us now going there and putting on a performance for ourselves, for the manager, and for the supporters as well.
Yeah, that was Seamus Coleman speaking to Nathan Murphy.
Not making any news this time?
No, he actually also talked about the goal celebration last week against Brighton, and people said, we had kind of given the 2 fingers to the Everton fans. Like, no, I don't score that many goals, but when I do, I tend to go a bit crazy.
Yeah, fair enough.
So better do it.
Yeah.
3 draws in a row for Arsenal in all competitions, and Arsenal needed a late goal from Henrik Mkhitaryan to rescue a 1-1 draw at home to Wolves. Celtic are top of the Scottish Premiership despite a goalless draw at Livingston yesterday. They're ahead of Hearts in goal difference, but they've a game in hand. Rangers moved into the top 3 with a 7-1 win over Motherwell at Ibrox. Stephen Gerrard's side 2 points behind Celtic, and those 2 have played the same amount of games. Big game at the Aviva on Saturday, and the mind games have started already. New Zealand coach Steve Hansen says he expects Conor Murray to start against the All Blacks this weekend. The Munster scrum half hasn't played this season due to a neck injury. The Kiwis are convinced that he'll line out. We'll find out probably later today. We'll get an injury update. Robbie Henshaw was a late withdrawal. Gary Ringrose and Rob Kearney missed out, but they are expected to be fit. Hansen does feel, though, Murray is determined to play.
If you go through the team, they've got world-class players, so that's why I believe Murray will play. I'm not saying that to cause any stir any trouble. I just think he's a real competitor. He'll want to play. If he's got a chance, then I'm thinking he'll probably play. If it's one of our guys in the same boat, then they'd be putting their hand up to play.
Okay, in Gaelic games then, 2 of the provincial club football finals have been confirmed. Galway champions Currafin will face Ballintubber of Mayo in the Connacht final. Defending All-Ireland champions Currafin beat Roscommon champions Clonagale 4-22 to 7 points. Ballintubber got the better of Leitrim's Ahawillan by 3-11 to 1-8. The Munster final will be contested by Dr. Crokes of Kerry and Milltown Malbay. Crokes dispatched of St Finbarrs on a scoreline of 5-20 to 1-11. The Clare champions beat the Nair 2-11 to 9 points. Defending Leinster champions Moorfield were knocked out. They were beaten by Portlaoise on a scoreline of 1-14 to 1-11. Portlaoise will play Kilmacud Crokes, who saw off Dunboyne by 2-17 to 7 points in Navan yesterday. And after the game, Paul Mannion, who scored 2-6, spoke to Oisin Langan. Oisin asked Paul Mannion, what's the key to the impressive form he's in at the moment?
Lads around me, I guess, like just I'm getting a lot of really good ball in good places, and just everyone on the team is enjoying it at the moment. Enjoying training, enjoying the type of football we're playing, and when you've got everyone happy in the dressing room, I suppose that kind of showed itself on the pitch, that's all.
The other Leinster semi-final between Longford champions Mullinacha and Era Og of Carlow. And finally, gents, Harry Redknapp. He's in the jungle. He is in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
All right.
Yeah. He's there.
That started last night?
I believe he's arrived. What they do is a certain amount of them arrive, but they should go for Wenger, shouldn't they? Try and get Wenger in.
This is going to be amazing. Harry Redknapp in the jungle.
Yeah.
I did not know this. I'm so excited for this. Like hanging out with his arm over the hammock every morning, telling people that he's no wheeler dealer. It's going to be brilliant. I'm looking forward to every single minute of this.
You can see him, the strategy he'll use to try and pick up those stars.
He'll get another autobiography out of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's... what?
He's the favourite to win it.
Is he?
Already, yeah.
He won't last, though, will he? I don't know enough. I haven't watched enough of it down through the years to know how difficult it is. It's like not that difficult, right? How long is it? How many weeks?
Probably goes on for about 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just thinking there's a lot of time to fill. So Harry's going to be coming up with some stories.
Well, if Wenger goes in, Harry Redknapp will be on course to finish 4th and he'll just get pipped by Wenger.
Hey, okay. Thanks, Phil. Here's Ian Henderson after Ireland's win on Saturday night against Argentina. Have a look.
I think from tonight you can see that where Argentina kind of got their way ins into the game was when they broke a tackle or they got a line break. I think when New Zealand do that, they capitalise on it almost every time. I think that's something we have to really tighten up on, is minimising those missed tackles and minimising the amount of clean, undisrupted ball that they get. That's where New Zealand play the best. I think if you look back to Chicago, how the boys did a good job on them was disrupting a lot of their line-out ball and very few missed tackles and putting pressure on them, making sure you're going after them, not only in attack but in defence too. And it's going to take that. It's going to take a full 15-man or full 23-man effort on match night, and it's going to take everyone else to prepare them well for the weekend.
That's Ian Henderson in conversation after the Argentina game. Alan Quinlan is here. Good morning to you.
Morning, Ger.
Now, Owen thought that there would be shrieks and some violence being meted out by Joe Schmidt in the video session this morning, that it would have been a bit of a video nasty. Would it have been that bad? Would there have been a bit of like...
I don't think he has too much time to kind of really focus on all the negatives and try and dissect them. Some of them are down to obviously poor execution and players making mistakes, and I think he'll certainly highlight some stuff and say, you know, rather than going too much individual, he'll collective look, this is what we did wrong as a group. And the kick-off receipts were a big concern, you know. Line-out was a concern. Defensively, a couple of mistakes for sure, but I think the intensity will be a bit different next week for obvious reason, but I think the line-out would worry me. And but it's difficult. I kind of said it before the game, and I'm not the expert here. Everyone has a good opinion on it, and I think it was the perfect performance in preparation for next week. Lots to work on. Yeah. Lots to work on.
You still get the win.
Look, as a player in the dressing room, they probably went off to feel a little bit frustrated. I'm glad to have it out of the way, and glad if you're still standing. Obviously, Sean O'Brien is the one that picks up another really disappointing injury for him. But I think disappointed that they've got through, and they've won by 11 points, playing poorly, making a lot of mistakes, dominating possession. I think the second half was a lot better. They brought a bit more of an aggression and fight, and maybe you were waiting for it to happen a little bit in the first half. It'll be totally different this week, Ger.
Still Argentina quite able to find pockets of space.
Yeah, well, they're a good side. And when I say it'll be totally different this week, that doesn't mean we'll win and we just turn up and win. I mean the level of intensity, the preparation.
If you remember back to the World Cup, Argentina beat us by going wide, and our defensive out wide was a disaster, and we were like, oh, we've got to overreact to that. But they killed us, like, beside rucks and like little inside balls whenever they were making ground against us on Saturday night. Do we have a defence that is weak on the inside?
I think we showed we were a little too porous on Saturday for sure. I think the scramble defence was good. In fairness, the one kind of glaringly obvious one was when they scored a try in the corner and Rory Best is your last defender and inside him is Keane Healy. Now that is stuff that you get really punished against New Zealand. They'll just keep exploiting that, and I think the transition needs to be a lot better. It's kind of down to energy levels and enthusiasm as well, and maybe just a real kind of sharp focus.
Which is all the same issue, really.
Yeah, you see, I think they got from that try, there was an uncharacteristic kind of lapse through the middle, I think, between Aki and Sexton, and then Argentina are very good when they get into kind of open field play, broken play a little bit, and Ireland's transition was just really poor. So then when you think, your Henshaw's not there, Ringrose is not there, Will Addison is playing at 13, maybe is he not as vocal and as dominant? But I just think the transition I'm talking about in defence is switching from, if you're caught on the inside, switching with slower forwards and putting them back in and getting to the outside. I just think that was like, my God, Rory Best's our last defender, and I could see it up high at the game on Saturday. And there wasn't really anyone trying to bust a gut to get back out. So I don't think that kind of stuff will happen. But I think if New Zealand get a lot of line breaks, and in fairness, you have to accept that sometimes, and you have to scramble, and it's that organisation really quickly in the space of 2 or 3 seconds which will possibly save you. So if we don't get better at that, but I think some of it is down to
attitude.
New Zealand in the back of the mind as well.
I think they've had New Zealand in the back of their mind since the start of the year, really. Well, after the Grand Slam.
Well, we all have.
But immediately after
that.
So
we're buying into that as well. So you can imagine what it's like as a player. You try, of course, you do the opposite, and you say, let's not have New Zealand anywhere in our mind. But it's just lingering a little bit, and maybe it's lingering in the preparation where, and it's fully understandable. If I like I said, if I'm in the squad last week, I don't want us to show our best hand. I want us to get through Argentina. Keep it pretty simple, but I think we made one probably mistake is we probably tried to go a bit wide ourselves, and then when we were a bit more direct, okay, we had to work a little bit harder, but we wore them down a little bit. And I think it'll be actually physically, that team hasn't played together since the Grand Slam victory against England, effectively, because there was a good few changes in the summer.
Yeah.
But I mean the core group together. So I think they'll get a lot out of it as regards match fitness and all that, and no better team to rough you up than Argentina. And I think some of the hits they put in were phenomenal. Lavanini, Jesus, he was trying to behead fellas and cut fellas in two, and he's a great player, and it was legal, so it wasn't that illegal, I'm saying. But Matera, some brilliant tackles, and so physically the players would have been sore after the game, but they'll get a surge for this week now.
It does seem that, from what you're saying there, that Ireland were a little bit rattled, or
I wouldn't say rattled. I'd say they were just a little bit off, and it's hard as a player on when you're there, and as a group then to get everything right. Okay, they were trying stuff and they made mistakes and they had turnovers, and they were just a percent or two off where they needed to be. That won't be an issue this week. Their intensity level will just, no matter what happens, it'll just go through the roof. You've then got to execute and, play really well. But I think just that aggression, that bit of zip that you need, and it's hard to have it every week. You build the emotion. The emotion will be through the roof this week, and it's hard to have that emotion high against Argentina. Argentina are a good side. There is no doubt about that. They're very dangerous if you allow them play. We're better, and we showed that we're better by winning by 11 points, playing poorly.
Yeah, a couple of things. We should talk about who the second row is going to be. It's interesting that Ian Henderson was out doing some of the media in the aftermath of the game, and yet the team looked like we were more proficient in the line-out when Devin Toner was there.
Yeah.
So what happened? Like, how do you...
You've two trains of thought here. Is one that Henderson gets another crack at it and Rory Best, and they fix the line-out, and, you know, will it be as bad as Saturday? Probably not. It's a bit of rustiness, timing issues. I think a lot of the papers and a lot of the people are talking about Rory Best and he's under pressure now. Of course he's under pressure, but it's not all his fault of throwing in the line-out. Some of it is down to Ian Henderson's calls. Some of it is down to lifting, timing, not getting up quick enough. Like there was one call that I think Ian Henderson made, and
Henderson's making these calls.
He's making the line-out calls. You know, you have to have someone running the line-out, and he's
Why
running.
is Peter O'Mahony not doing that?
Well, yeah, I think he possibly Peter O'Mahony doesn't make the calls either in Munster. You know, so ideally it's a second row. Back rows can do it particularly if
they're world class.
If they stand at half back, yeah.
You know.
Well, he's world class at going in the air. That doesn't mean he's world class at calling them. He could be, and he's well capable of calling. But I think you want to impose and give that responsibility to your second row in an ideal world. You do want to do that. And I think Ian Henderson has shown, look, he ran the line-out really well in Twickenham. He called line-outs for the British and Irish lines. And you want a good dominant second row. So, listen, Paul O'Connell is probably the best. Victor Matfield was these guys are the best that's ever been running lineouts, and they make mistakes in some games where just 2 or 3 lineouts they got it wrong and they hold their hand up. You try and fix that stuff during the week, and they will fix that. So the other kind of train of thought is you bring Devin Toner straight in, who has that experience, who's obvious height advantage, and when he came on he kind of got up between those Argentinian jumpers and just dominated the air.
He was also, it was him and Tyke Furlong who were lifting Peter O'Mahony at one point. You're like, well, look
defensively,
at that.
In that shortened line-out where he won the ball clean, yeah. So, yeah, and his general play around the field was good. So it could go either way. It's probably more in Toner's. It's leaning towards Toner now to win that primary possession, because I think having Henderson maybe come off the bench with that impact when it in the last 20 minutes. Where, you know, sometimes it can go helter-skelter when you're playing the All Blacks.
Yeah, and is Rory Best safe from general play and...?
He's safe this week. He needs to probably play better, and he'll admit that himself. He's honest. So he will have to play better. But I think collectively, you know, some of the performances were off a little bit on Saturday. Cian Healy was very good. Scrum was superb. Tyke Furlong was good. James Ryan was very, very good.
Dan Levy
when he was outstanding when he came on. I think Stander and O'Mahony were quiet, and they probably need to impose themselves a little bit more. Like Stander had something like 20 carries and 18 tackles, or 22 carries or something. In fairness, he's working his socks off, but he's just not falling where he's making line breaks at the moment, or swatting people off and getting over the gain line regularly. So this week, you know, they've got to deliver and bring that kind of level, a level different than they did last week. But so there was a lot of. I think the forwards collectively need to be a lot better, and I genuinely think they will.
It sounds like you're making 2 changes if you're Joe Schmidt. One enforced, obviously, Levy in for O'Brien, and the other being Toner in for Henderson.
I think you're making 3. Rob Kearney's coming straight in at full back, right?
In the pack, I mean.
Sorry.
Yeah, in the pack. Yeah, I think so. I think you might. But look, like I said, if it's Ian Henderson and James Ryan again, you know, so they have a bit of work in the bank. Like you know, you go back to Twickenham and think how good those two were, and how strong and aggressive they were. But
what about Twickenham on Saturday? How much do you read into the Retallick factor when it comes to selecting your 2 Ireland boys? Does Toner have a better impact at perhaps stopping the Retallick factor, or was his performance on Saturday in London just out of this world and something that you can't really plan too much into?
They got it right. Look, I've been thrown up in lineouts before so many times. Some you get near, some you don't get near at all. You end up winning one, getting a hand to another, and then the opposition are panicking. That's where a bit of panic sets in if there's 2 pods going up, and that's where you want to get the opposition lineout to. So Retallick he got in an area where he put a lot of pressure, and a few just went right for him. The lift has got to be right, the timing of the jump and all that stuff. But look, Retallick and Whitelock are phenomenal players. I think they've been you know, the bench setters for a number of years now. And yeah, but like I said, I'm not concerned. I think it's a timing issue. Like, people have this kind of myth that you have to pick all the tall guys to have a good line out, you know, and if a guy is an inch or two smaller, that he's not effective. Yeah, it's the lift as well, and it's timing of the throw, and if you've a big, like you say, if you've Toner lifting O'Mahony, well, you're gaining extra airtime there as well. So Paul O'Connell and Donegal Callan used to lift me defensively sometimes, and you can imagine the two of them at my kneecaps or below my kneecaps, because I was comfortable in the air. Like, they could put me up, whereas if I lifted Paul, you know, they're actually getting me higher than me lifting one of them. Yeah. Because I'm a bit lighter, and they're literally down around my calves throwing me in the air. Now, sometimes they didn't bring me down, and I remember one time we played Harlequins in London, they lifted me the defensive line out, and Quins won it, and they just dropped me and ran away, and I landed on my back, and I was winded for about 60 seconds. But, you know, so it's just a good line out is about timing as well, and our timing was off on Saturday, and I find it, look, some of Rory's throws were a bit wobbly. He'll need to be better there, but I think collectively the unit needs to get their timing right.
What was the defence like?
Defensive line out or defence
just generally, like,
it was soft-ish.
Yeah,
I think it improved a lot in the second half, and we just put an awful lot of pressure on Argentina, and when they tried to break out, we were hungrier. The hunt on the inside was much better. And like I said, in the first half, that was just a little bit, God, is he your man? Is he my man? You know, that indecision. And that's what happened. Like, Sexton and Bundyaki don't miss front-on tackles. Now, Sanchez takes the ball to the line really well and just, is he going out the back door? And he hits the front line runner and he gets through. There's a bit of a scramble, a couple of phases, and they score in the corner. You don't really see Ireland conceding up the middle like that. We've been guilty of being a little bit narrow and maybe just getting caught on a bit of width.
And this is the opposite, right?
We don't get we don't soak around the fringes either. So, yeah, so that's just kind of, it's down to a little bit of attitude and maybe just been a little bit off.
Yeah, and in terms of the quality of our attacking play, like subbing in a 13 in the warm-up, not ideal. Like, particularly because Robbie Henshaw is kind of reaching that point where he's beginning to hit the peak of his career, and yet, you know, you're not going to say that Addison had any negative impact on how the team played, but there's just a little bit of like, ooh, we're all week long, this is what we expected, now we've got to change.
Yeah, and that's not ideal, and maybe that had a little bit of a factor as well. But I think Ireland's attack, a lot of it is based off really good strikes off lineouts, getting into good positions where you get in behind the gain line, and then you can build relentless pressure. Whether, you know, we don't usually go wide all the time. There's a lot of good strike plays, and that's the game plan and the way it's structured. And I think we got guilty of just being a bit lateral on Saturday. And you know, when you're up very high at the stadium, you can see, it's a great way of seeing what way teams are defending and attacking. Okay, you see more at home on TV when you're seeing breakdown and right in where the ball is. But Argentina were just fanning out. So there was a lot of numbers. When Sexton was getting the ball, there was like a lot of Argentinians standing right in front of him. So they defended smartly, and they were quite cunning in the way they did it. I thought we needed to be a bit more direct around the fringes. I think for, you know, some of the earlier pressure that led to the try off the scrum from Marmion came from a directness. Furlong makes a carry off Sexton's shoulder, gets in James Ryan a couple of carries, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought we drifted away from that. We thought, oh, this might be easy enough here, and let's play a little bit of...
Too fast to start.
Yeah, so I think Ireland would be a lot direct, and we're a good direct team. Sometimes we get criticised for not being more open, but I think if we're going to try and, you know, there's a point in the game where you need to kind of impose yourself, and we probably didn't do that for long enough on Saturday, but I don't have any concerns going forward on Saturday.
Rob Kearney comes straight in and fall back after that?
Yeah, he does, yeah. Look, he's Jordan Larmour is a superstar at the moment, and he's such a talented player, but I think Kearney's ability in the air is something that New Zealand will test anyway, even with Rob Kearney there, and they'll target Stockdale. New Zealand kick a fair bit themselves, and so Barrett will look out for Stockdale and Earls and try and isolate them at times on Saturday. So it won't be any surprise, I don't think, that Rob Kearney will come in.
Is there any potential that the All Blacks were looking forward to the Ireland game a bit, and that's why their performance against
both sides,
England, the Twickenham was like...
Yeah, so we shouldn't be fooled that thinking, oh God, England should have won, and we beat England, and this is going to be easier than maybe it has been. This team is not as good as maybe the team in 15 or the team in 11 that won World Cups. If you have that kind of an attitude, Ireland won't have that attitude. But I think we shouldn't create it either. They were certainly a little bit off. That group didn't play in 2 weeks. They were probably enjoyed the sight to London. They left Japan a couple of days before that test, so they've had kind of 8-10 days in London.
Still matters them a lot at full time.
Of course, yeah. And look,
they played themselves into nearly losing.
Poor the way the game went, I suppose.
Yeah, but look, I think
they're stupid twice.
But yeah, they were. But New Zealand just have that ability. So we suffered before in 2013. You think they're never beaten, and if you think that way and you relax any little bit. England were unlucky. I thought they should have won the game in the end. But then when you look back at the stats and the pressure, possession, line breaks, the offloads that New Zealand had, even in those wet conditions, they still, England brought a level of intensity that was real backs to the wall stuff with their effort levels, and sometimes that can win you games, and they were nearly rewarded. I thought Laws was just offside. I know, again, it's divided opinion.
Yeah, even so, right, even if he is just offside, is he clearly offside enough for the referee's opinion to be changed?
He is. For me, he is, yeah. There's a line there. And what happens in the ruck, which some people are not getting here, is the ruck actually got longer as the couple of seconds went on. The New Zealanders stepped forward a little bit, and there's clearly a black player, and he's ahead of that black player. Now, there's another argument to say the ball is out. I think he's offside, and you're always running the risk if you're a foot ahead of your other players. And Laws was clearly standing a foot ahead, whether he's onside or not.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Maybe he's offside, but you also have like a world-class goal kicker sitting in the pocket, and you're playing the ball back and forth. Like, give your goal kicker a chance to kick the winning drop goal after you get the ball back.
Yeah, and they weren't able to do that, and
but just brain dead.
Yeah, it was a bit of game management there, and look, they'll be different as well, New Zealand. But I don't think they were going into the English game saying, oh, the big one is next week, because England is a massive one for New Zealand, and it's a massive game for everyone when they play England. But I think maybe they were a little bit. It was a perfect result for them as well, wasn't it? They win the game, not playing as well as they would like to.
Just on the refereeing call, I feel it's really split, this one. Like the London Times have a referee in there going against what you're saying there, of course. It's an English publication and all of that, and we probably have the same supporting our cause if it was in the Irish Independent or anything like that. I just wonder that if it's so split, how can we allow the TMO to overrule the referee when we're trying to empower the referees?
It's a great point. So we have a 50-50 call here that I think is 100% he's offside. Somebody else thinks he's onside. Some referees think he's offside, some think he's onside. So this is where World Rugby need to step in and say, look, having reviewed it, we're a meeting with some of the top referees, this is why and how, and we believe it's a wrong decision or a right decision. Yeah. And then the public go, well, they've exhausted it, they've had an inquiry.
And we understand.
And
it's been communicated.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, but I think he didn't take control either, Gar says, which is disappointing. And the new directives are he's supposed to dictate the topic of the conversation, whereas Marius Jonker, the TMO, was giving him recommendations. He can see it himself. And he can even say, look, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? He can say that to get a bit of advice, but I thought he should have been more dominant there. But,
was it Neil Tracy who was on Twitter saying that the best description he ever heard of whether or not a ball was out was whether or not if a bird flying overhead was to poo on the ball, does it land? When's the ball out?
The ball is supposed to be out when it's behind the hindmost foot as well.
Right.
So if it slips behind the foot. Well, sometimes you see now the way they're
The referee goes, ball's out, because it's like...
Yeah. And then the other side of the ruck, it's the hindmost foot as well. But Stephen Jones made a really good point in the Times yesterday. He thinks it was okay. Stuart Barnes did in commentary. Some other guys think it was offside. That you look at every ruck in every game nearly now, and teams are kind of halfway up the middle of that ruck, and there's a lot of really, really marginal ones. So if Sexton gets the ball and they pass and they play out wide, well, it could have been a penalty, but we're not calling that because play has gone on here.
There was
only when something affects. If there's an effect,
there was another incident in the very last play where one of the England players, it might have been the scrum half, was tackled. He didn't have the ball, and he's like looking at the touch judge, and touch judge like, off you go. And that would have been a penalty.
Yeah, it could
like,
easily been a penalty.
Literally the last second where they're about to kick the ball into touch, but it's the All Blacks, so they get that decision because they get all the decisions.
Well, England got one the week before. Now, to be fair, it did balance itself out. I think
it was beautiful karma.
I'm going to ask you about the hack. I just want to play this quickly first. It's Joe Schmidt speaking after Saturday night's match. Have a look.
I'd be delighted if we could be as competitive as we were the last 3 times we played them. You know, the fact that, you know, the points differential between us is so narrow. The fact that in those 3 games, you know, that there was the one in 2013. I am still bleeding from that. You know, it hurts when that happens. And while Chicago was a great Band-Aid, and in fact it was a full bandage, it was great. But you know, 2 weeks later we were very, very much in the game, and it was very tough, very, very tough. You know, as physical as it was tonight, it was a step up last time they were in town. So, you know, the challenge for our guys is to step up, and you know, I'm confident that they can, and at the same time I'm well aware of what challenge the All Blacks present.
Yeah, so giving nothing away there. I want to ask you about the haka. Is it something players enjoy facing? Is it something that you kind of go, yeah, I want to see this, I want to get up there, up close and personal? Are you there in the back of that picture there somewhere?
I was in front of a few of them anyway.
That's 2013, I think, is it?
Is that 13, that one?
That's 08, apparently. You are there.
Yeah, I was there somewhere. Yeah, I enjoyed it at that stage because obviously you're a bit older, and I probably would have been a little bit nervous of it before. I stood in front of it a couple of times, but you just try and be respectful of it and block it out a little bit. But I enjoy watching it all the time, and a few times I've kind of gone, geez, I'm here in front of it now. It's brilliant because you watch it as a kid and all that. Everyone, most people like the haka. It does give them a little bit of a psychological advantage. I was disappointed on Saturday because I wanted to hear, and I liked the haka. The English crowd were singing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" during, and it's just like, it's kind of like petty. Do you know what I mean? Oh, one side, we're going to drown you out and intimidate you. It's just people. Yeah. Actually, it's more of a show now, isn't it? Rather than
it doesn't really. Does it have that much of a psychological impact?
It fires them up, you know what I mean? It's like screaming and shouting in the dressing room and kind of getting pumped up and the adrenaline up. It does give them a little bit of... Some people say it's an unfair advantage because we're standing around and you have anthems and you're walking here and you're meeting the president and you kind of get a little bit cooler and the muscles relax a bit, whereas this gives them this big kind of last psychological push where they're... But I think at the start I would have been a bit nervous with it, slightly. I remember though I played against Samoa in '96. Actually, it was my first game for Munster in 1996 against Samoa and Cork, and they did some sort of a war dance, and I was like, Jesus, I thought they were going to come right up to us, you know. And if you remember, I can't think of his name. The winger that played for New Zealand, I can't think of his name now. He played for Samoa and then played for New Zealand. The winger, he was your first big, strong, kind of powerful John Olomu type. Yeah. And he was like right in front of me, and I was nervous with that one, all right, you know. But as the years went on, I think people more enjoy it now.
I think so too. We have another picture of you here tackling.
Or not tackling. Yeah. It's not really a tackle. It's kind of grabbing him around the back of the collar. That was in 2008.
He's just about to get the offload away. There's another Irish
yeah, it's Rog. Roger's hand there is. I was on the inside trying to reef the ball out, but yeah, he was a serious player, taking it to the line. It's strong and physical as well, you know.
That's in Lansdowne Road, is it?
That was in Croke Park. That one.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that was in Croke Park.
Wasn't close.
It ended up being
35-19 or something, was it?
No, it was 23.
It was pretty close.
9 or something like that, or 23-7, or.
That's the Irish marching up to them.
It was Willie Anderson, wasn't it?
Back in the day.
up to Buck Shelford.
Far less intimidating back then, the All Blacks.
They were what?
Far less intimidating in that particular picture.
I think they were more intimidating back then because they were rougher and more aggressive and stuff like that.
There was no
You
cameras.
do the haka now, like you can't go up and box the opposition and late tackle someone, or the first kick-off kind of march out and jump all over everybody.
Well, you say that. The last time there was a game at the Aviva, they took the head off a couple of our players completely illegally and got away with it.
Fekatoa and Sam Kane and Robbie Henshaw and Fekatoa and Zebo. And we've exhausted probably the conversations around high shots nowadays, and both those incidents would be probably red cards. Certainly the Fekatoa one, there's mitigating factors with Sam Kane's one that, you know, he was kind of launching forward and Robbie Henshaw spun around and the contact was accidental. But yeah, it was physical. That game 2 years ago was really physical. And remember, we were on the back of beating them in Chicago. So, and I thought like that game was quite close in the end. But they kind of raised the level of performance a little bit and you know, perform really well in Dublin.
That's the thing about this week, is when you think about the injuries that we've got, we're in proper World Cup mode. You might say that if we lose to the All Blacks on Saturday, it's like, well, you know, we didn't have Gary Ringrose if he's not available, or we didn't have Robbie Henshaw if he's unavailable, or say Conor Murray, or potentially Rob Kearney. But in actual fact, it's perfectly fair because we don't have those players. That's the exact situation we're likely to be in 12 months' time if we get into the business end, if we get into a semi-final or perhaps even a final of a World Cup. We are likely to have an injury list as long as we do now, if not longer.
Yeah, every team has to cope, so and that's obviously, that was the big talk after 2015, you know, the players that were missing and not being able to cope. So I think there's a lot of depth in a lot of positions. Now, the obvious ones that you kind of go, you don't want to lose a Sexton and a Murray because they're world class. And if you have world class players for big games, then you've better chance of winning. So it's, every team has to cope with it. I don't think this game is going to, it's not going to have any significance come World Cup next year. I think there's a massive determination from New Zealand not to lose to Ireland again and kind of stick a little psychological kind of hammer, give us a little psychological hammer blow to say, okay, 2 years ago, a bit of a shock, don't kind of come into our territory again and, you know, put you back in your box, if you like.
It was 21-9 the last time in Dublin. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah,
but did they score a late breakaway try? Was
it was close enough, I think. Brad Thorne scored a try kind of mid or late way through the second half. So it was, and there was a lot of optimism for that game. So look, you play New Zealand, and I think there's enough experience in the team on Saturday to know that if you're not right, if you're not on the money, they can blow you away. You could be 15, 20 points down in a 10-minute period. And they have that ability. And interestingly, CJ Standard did a piece, and it was, you know, he was talking about at the weekend, ideally you'd love to be 14 points ahead because they have this ability of just coming back. They're 15 points down to England on Saturday. There's no panic. You're nearly guaranteed that they're going to score that try. They have a kickable penalty, and you think some teams will say, bring it back to 12, maybe we'll get another one. We'll wait for an opportunity. They kick to the corner and then they build a phase of McKenzie under the post. Then they get the penalty, and it's suddenly a 5-point game, you know.
Yeah, and you know what's happening at that point.
Yeah.
Are we going to beat them?
I always wait till later in the week to see the teams and stuff like that, and you get a feel for where it's at.
Conor Murray going to play?
I don't think so at this stage, no. I don't think so. I did think he was a few weeks ago. I thought it was a bit of a... But it's kind of gone forward and back now, and they've drawn New Zealand in, and maybe that was Joe Schmidt's policy. So New Zealand don't know. We don't know who's going to start at 9. So will it make a huge difference? It'll make a difference that the player's not there, because not just from the box kicking and his general play. I think when you have a Conor Murray who can make impact tackles on big, strong forwards.
Yeah.
He's a huge addition to you defensively, and I just think that the way he covers in the back line and fills in.
He beat them in Chicago, he beat them in the Lions tour. They know exactly who he is. They're like, you know, he's in their heads when he's taking the field in a way that no matter who else plays isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great, look, I think he's just so physical, and they're a physical side who like to impose themselves. Very skillful side for sure, but he just makes so many good tackles as well, and he has that ability to link up with players as well and score tries against them. That try he got in Wellington
it was class.
Yeah, it was in that second test.
All right, Alan, good stuff. Thanks very much.
We look forward to the end of the week, sure.
Yeah, we'll talk again then. Right, a reminder, of course, OTB AM is live with screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Here's more from Stephen Kelly and Nathan at Stamford Bridge.
Well, no doubt the Manchester derby was the main event today, but this was a tasty little starter in the end, despite the scoreline. It was 0-0 between Chelsea and Everton, but I'm not quite sure how it finished 0-0, Stephen.
No, I know, it was end-to-end stuff, especially the second half. Chelsea were really going for a push forward loads, had a lot of opportunities and probably should have taken them. So for them, I think they'd be very disappointed not to come out with the 3 points. With the race the way it is at the moment, I don't think you seem to be able to drop 3 points and catch it back up, but we'll tell about that in the future. But for Everton, a great 4 point. 0-0 here for them is a great result, and it's something that they needed to get. Their away form has been poor and they needed to get a result, especially against a team like Chelsea who have been in form. An away result for them has been fantastic.
You were making the point that in a title race like this is probably the type of game that Manchester City would have won.
Yeah.
Probably because they've so many goal scoring options. This was again one of those days for Alvaro Morata where, did he do enough?
Yeah, he just seemed to lack a little bit. He made some good runs, and in the first half I could see his position sense was excellent. Second half though, towards the end of the game, he was killing them getting caught offside so many times.
Frustration it seemed.
Frustration it was, and he was getting frustrated because it was being calls and he was giving out about the referee. But you got to do your job for your team, and when your team are progressing up the field and you're getting caught offside 4 or 5 times when there's only 10 minutes to go in the game, you're completely changing it and you're giving Everton an opportunity to put the ball down and kick it back down the field again. So for him, it'd be disappointing. For Chelsea, again disappointing, but for Everton, a great result.
Eden Hazard was brilliant at times without ever just having that one final game defining moment. So when you look at Chelsea in comparison to where Liverpool are and where Manchester City are, is there something they're missing?
Yeah, I think Man City are the one that needs to catch. Liverpool are getting close to them, and their front three are they're so hard to play against, and they move off the ball. Chelsea have Hazard. I don't know whether they need something else. William was very good today again, and probably should have squared it for Morata, and that would have changed the game. But they do lack a little bit. They don't have the same spark as what Man City have. Man City are just a joy to watch, and they would have put this game to bed. They would have put Everton to the sword, and they would have finished it with a comfortable result in the end. Chelsea, they could have won it. They didn't, and they're going to regret those opportunities. But in Eden Hazard, they do have an unbelievable player, and he was firing today, just was missing in the final. The final little bit was a little bit lacking.
Yeah, hard for Chelsea not to be utterly reliant on Hazard when he is so absolutely brilliant, but probably not going to be good enough on his own to win the league. Morata scored an offside goal, it was clearly offside, but if Morata was just a little bit better, if he was able to score those goals and be onside, that's what they need. They need someone who's 35 goals this year alongside Eden Hazard to be contenders.
Yeah, or if they could play 13 players and or even just 12, and Morata and Giroud could both play and they could share between them 35 goals. They might just be able to achieve that, but one alone is not going to cut the cheese for them.
Well, I just move on now. Paul Malone is the secretary of the referees Midland branch, and he's on the line now to talk to us about a fairly shocking incident that has come to everybody's attention really through social media. Paul, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. How's things?
Can you talk to us a little bit about an image has gone round of one of your referees, Daniel Sweeney, who suffered very serious facial injuries after a football match. Talk to us a little bit about what you know, as much as you can anyway, of the specifics of the incident. What happened?
Well, I can't really go into the details of what happened because it's under investigation at the moment, and I wasn't there myself, so it'd be second-hand information. What I can say is that it was disgraceful, first of all, and the injuries that Daniel sustained were severe, severe to his face, with his jaw broken on both sides, fractured eye socket and fractured cheekbone, and stitches in the nose. He's heading to St James's this morning and then to the Eye and Ear. There's really not much more I could say about what happened prior because that's, as I said, it's under investigation with the Garda Síochána.
Okay, so he is a referee. There was a soccer match being played.
Yeah, he's one of our referees from the Midland branch.
Yeah. Where was the game being played?
It was played in the Midlands in Horslip.
Okay, and Daniel's obviously a referee. He's been a referee for a long time at this stage, I suspect.
He's refereed about 8 years, Daniel is.
Have you ever seen an incident like this in your time? How long are you involved?
No, I've not. I haven't witnessed assaults, but there has been like a bit of aggro. All right, you deal with it. You know what I mean? You deal with it as it comes, and you send it to the league, and the league will deal with the matter then. But never. This is a first. It's just shocking. I'm actually out of words because I was so angry last night. I was over in the hospital with them last night, and I was so angry over it. Like, it should never happen.
How is Daniel? What was he saying? What was he thinking? Because you go out on a Sunday morning as a volunteer, effectively, to referee a game to keep soccer going. Because obviously these games can't take place unless there are...
exactly. There's no ref, no game. Daniel, strangely enough, Daniel is in good spirit. He's in good form. Last night, like, he's strong-minded. He's a good lad. If it was me, I'd be so angry. He's the opposite. He'll always think about everybody else. Always does. He'll worry about, well, look, their families too, and this, that, and the other. And I'd say, look, Daniel, no, you were assaulted, and that's the whole of it. And he'd be the opposite. He'd be, no, look, we'll take it as it comes.
Had the game been particularly contentious? Like, was there an offside?
No, absolutely nothing got to do with that at all. No. Look, at the end of the day, as if a player or a manager has a bad game, does he deserve to be insulted? Does he deserve to be assaulted? No. So referees are the very same. A referee should never be insulted, or never should be assaulted. Definitely never should be assaulted. Nobody should be assaulted. So it's so wrong. So hopefully the justice will come.
This is a wider problem, though, isn't it? There was a statistic doing the rounds this morning that 7 matches in the last 6 weeks have been cut short due to unruly antics from the sidelines.
Yeah, it is. Like, there's a difference with the soccer, GAA, and the rugby. You can see with the rugby the respect that referees get, and that's what we need to get to. We need to get to that level. For safety of referees, if there's no safety for referees, you're not going to have referees. Referees are just going to start leaving.
Paddy Dempsey, the chairman of the DDSL, was speaking last week in the Irish Examiner. I think we just brought it up on screen there a few moments ago. Sort of scarily accurate on Saturday, saying that our worry now is that somebody will get seriously hurt or even be killed. Which is sort of grim when you look at the reality that 24 hours later we're looking at the reality of somebody who is seriously hurt and posting that image on social media. That, again, it kind of comes back to this idea that it's sort of insidious and it's sort of unsurprising to people, I would imagine, who are looking at this on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, it is. And look, it was inevitable. It was always going to happen. If not Daniel, somebody else. And like that too. All it takes, one punch can kill a fella, and people have to realise that. Some people could be remorse straight away afterwards and say, didn't mean that, it was just an angry moment. But that one punch could kill a person, and that's the reality of it. So they need to start thinking of that these people have families as well, and these people are going out here to do a job to the best that they can do it. So it needs to stop.
In your view, is an issue here the fact that it is schoolboy or schoolgirl football, whereby the idea of pushy parents is a very real thing in these ranks? Because there has been some suggestion that it's just safer for the well-being of referees for them to just manage in the senior amateur ranks rather than even touch schoolboy or schoolgirl football. No, it starts from schoolboys. Of course, it has to start from schoolboys. You have to, and that's, as you say, you do have competitiveness and you do have pushy parents, but that's fine once it's within the limits. Like, you can't be, and I've often witnessed it in underage where someone has swearing, and I'd stop them and I said, hold there for a minute now, we're trying to teach kids not to swear on the pitch. It's no good ye swearing on the sideline if we're trying to teach kids, because they're just going to do what you're doing. And 99% of the time they will. They'll stop and say, I'm so sorry, I apologise. And that'll be left. But it has to start from the bottom.
This was a senior game, though, just to clarify, wasn't it? It was a
Division 1 game.
Yeah. So, what can the league actually do here? Obviously, it's a Garda investigation as well, but presumably the league can step in and take action based on the referee's report, so that they don't need to go away and have due process and all that kind of stuff. The referee report.
Once the league gets the report in, and they can deal with their side of the house straight away, and of course then we have an investigation with the Garda Síochána, and they'll deal with that side of it. But football and side of it, the league will deal with that matter.
Okay, and so what are potential sanctions open to the league? Is like the entire club liable to be thrown out if a member of a club is found or suspected to have been involved?
That I can't answer. We as referees, we're a branch, and we don't. That's the league matter, which they don't tell us who gets suspended and what to get suspended. We just go to ref the game. They deal with that side of it. They'll deal with the punishments, the sanctions, and all that, and we just deal with what we have to do, which is refereeing a game and making sure that we're in tip-top form on our game on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning.
Okay, and as a branch of referees, do you feel like if the sanctions aren't serious, that you can continue to support the league?
Look, we're professionals in what we do. We're amateur. It's an amateur game, but we're professional in what we do. At the end of the day, the league have guidelines that they have to abide by too from the FAI. So, but with this case, I can't tell you exactly, but like it'll be a long time. It'll be a long time for a couple of them guys for playing football. But we just accept it, and we get on with it, because at the end of the day, we're professional in what we do, and they have guidelines to deal with matters, and they have to be within them guidelines. So, and we ignore that side of it. We just make sure that our referees are okay, and we do the best. We'll support Daniel. The whole Midland branch and the FAI will support Daniel to the best that we can, and we just leave that side of it to them.
And will your referees feel safe going back to that venue to do games again in the future?
It depends. It depends on what happens in the next few days, and on when we get the information on what has happened. But at the end of the day, it's not the club. It's individuals. It's not the club. Like, of course, the club will get punished because they have to control their players, but it's not like there's great guys in that club. So no, I'll referee. If I'm told to referee next week, I'll referee next week.
All right, Paul, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
It's Paul Malone there, the Irish Soccer Referees Society Midlands Branch Secretary. It's grim, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously it's extremely grim when you see those pictures coming out. It almost just seems a little bit more insidious than other things. That when you look at the DDSL quotes on Saturday, I know it's different, but it kind of sums up a culture problem in a sport quite often, even if it is at a different level. That's the DDSL chief talking about the sheer number of games that have been called off over the last couple of weeks. It's seriously worrying when it hasn't really been huge headline news. Maybe it's just not headline news because there's less people posting video footage online. Maybe it's a simple thing like that.
So those games, just to explain, those games have been cancelled because of
unruly antics from the sidelines, said that Irish Examiner piece.
So parents,
yeah,
as opposed to the kids getting in fights, or maybe kids getting in fights.
Yeah, potentially, there's no sort of one size fits all to why these matches have been called off. And that's also the point out that's only from games with referees, which in their case doesn't begin until under 11 level. Would be grim if it was happening at a younger age again than that. But don't rule out that possibility when it comes to pushy parents.
Yeah, all right. That's pretty much all we've got time for on today's show. We're back this evening, Monday Night Rugby coming your way at around 5 or half 5. So stay tuned to all of our social channels for that. offtheball.com/YouTube, offtheball.com/Twitter, twitter.com/offtheball, or youtube.com/offtheball as well for all your details. You can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 7:45. Good luck.
OTB
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.